What would you do if everything you thought you knew about your life turned out to be a lie? Betrayed by those closest to you, a hidden inheritance leads to an unexpected journey that will change everything. But the truth comes at a cost. Are you ready to face it? I inherited an old, crumbling garage from my grandfather, a gift that seemed like a cruel joke. My sister Julia got a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City. The disparity in our inheritances was stark, and Richard, my husband, made sure to remind me of it. His anger was palpable when I told him about the garage, a useless fool. He called me, his words stinging like a slap. 15 years of marriage, and this was how he saw me. The garage was an old, weathered building located on the outskirts of town, far from the hustle of city life. I couldn't fathom why Grandpa had left it to me, but I had no choice but to accept it. That night, after Richard's cruel outburst, I found myself packing my things. My marriage had just crumbled, and the weight of betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders. The house we had shared was never really mine, not in Richard's eyes. He had always paid the bills, and it seemed as though he believed his financial contribution gave him the right to decide everything. When he kicked me out, I stood there in disbelief, clutching the ownership certificate to the garage. Where will you go? Richard's words echoed in my mind. I didn't have an answer, not yet. I walked out into the cold night, unsure of where to turn. The rain fell lightly, but the chill in the air had nothing to do with the weather. It was the coldness inside me, the emptiness of betrayal. The garage was my only refuge, the only place I could think of to spend the night. I opened my phone, checked the map, and began the long journey there. The ride took nearly 2 hours, the buses running infrequently, and the industrial zone where the garage stood looked desolate in the rain. When I finally reached the garage, the door was locked, the metal rusted, and the key in my hand felt heavy, almost ancient. I shoved the key into the lock, but nothing happened. My heart sank as I twisted the key, using all my strength. The lock groaned, protesting against the force. Despair washed over me. Was this a sign? Had Grandpa left me something that was beyond redemption? Just as I was about to give up, the key turned with a click. The door creaked open, revealing the dark interior. The air inside was musty, thick with years of dust and neglect. But something caught my eye, a gleam of metal beneath the tarp, hidden away for who knows how long. I took a cautious step forward, my breath shallow as I inched closer to the mysterious object under the tarp. The dim light from my phone's flashlight barely illuminated the scene. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached out to touch the tarp. It was damp and heavy, the fabric covered with layers of dust, but I couldn't help the surge of curiosity that pushed me to uncover whatever lay beneath. With a steady pull, the tarp slid off, revealing a car. But not just any car, a black 1950s Ford Thunderbird, its chrome details still gleaming in the soft light. The paint was flawless, as if the car had just rolled off the assembly line, and the leather seats were pristine, not a crack to be found. I stepped closer, my heart racing. How was this possible? Grandpa had talked about his Thunderbird, his first car, the one he'd sold when my dad was born. But he always spoke of it with a sense of regret, as if letting it go was the hardest decision he'd ever made. Could this really be it? I ran my fingers over the cold metal, the touch sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a car. It was a piece of history, Grandpa's history, and now mine. My mind raced with questions. Why was it here? Why hadn't Grandpa told us about it? What was he keeping from us? I didn't know the answers, but as I stood there, I realized that this car wasn't just a symbol of the past. It might hold the key to something much bigger. Behind the car, I noticed an old wooden table. On it sat a small box carved with intricate patterns. It looked out of place in the otherwise empty garage. My curiosity deepened. What was in the box? Without thinking, I moved closer and lifted the lid. Inside, there was an envelope, old, yellowed with age, and sealed. It had my name on it, Victoria, open when the time comes. I froze. How did Grandpa know? How did he know I'd be here in this moment, at this very garage? It was as if everything had been planned long before. I picked up the envelope with shaking hands, the weight of it pressing on me like the rain outside. As I carefully opened the letter, I knew that whatever was written inside would change everything. The letter inside the envelope was written in Grandpa's firm, unmistakable handwriting. As I read the words, they felt like a lifeline, a connection to him that reached across time. The letter began simply, but with a heavy weight of truth. My dear Victoria, it started, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone, and you found your way to my old garage. You've probably already seen my Thunderbird, the car I never actually sold, despite what I told everyone, including you. I sat back, processing the revelation. This was Grandpa's first car, the one he'd sold so long ago. But this was just the beginning. Grandpa continued. You're probably surprised and confused. Why didn't I tell you the truth while I was alive? Why did I keep it a secret? I'll try to explain. Let me start from the beginning. This Thunderbird wasn't just my first car. It was a part of my work, a part of my life that I kept hidden from all of you. My pulse quickened as I read further. Grandpa, the man I had always seen as a simple engineer and educator, was more than that. He had a secret life, one he had kept hidden even from his own family. I worked in special services, he wrote, a department few people knew about. We did what would now be called industrial espionage. We obtained technology's blueprints, prototypes from abroad. The Thunderbird wasn't just my transport. It was part of my work. It has hidden compartments where I carried documents, samples, sometimes even people who needed to be evaluated. I could hardly breathe. My grandfather, a spy, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who read me bedtime stories, had been involved in a world I never even knew existed. My mind struggled to piece together the man I thought I knew with this new, dangerous version of him. Victoria. The letter continued. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you this now, why I've left this to you. The reason is simple, because you are like me. Not in how you look, but in who you are inside. I've watched you all your life, and I've seen that you have that same strength, that same core, even if you've never noticed it yourself. The words struck me hard. Grandpa had seen something in me, something I hadn't recognized in myself. And now, after everything had fallen apart, after Richard's betrayal, it seemed that Grandpa had prepared me for something bigger. But why? What was I supposed to do with all of this? I kept reading. You have a strong character, Victoria, the letter concluded. You just don't know it yet. I've left you everything you need to understand the role you must play in all of this. The Thunderbird is only the beginning. The letter ended, but my mind was racing. What was I supposed to do with all this information? Why had Grandpa left it for me, of all people? It felt like a weight had been dropped onto my shoulders, but I couldn't see where to carry it or what path to take. I closed the letter, my hands still shaking as I processed the words. Grandpa, a spy. The Thunderbird, a secret vehicle used for espionage. It all seemed impossible, like something out of a spy novel. But here I was, holding the letter, standing in the garage that Grandpa had left me. I needed to understand more, to piece together the puzzle he had left behind. The sound of the rain outside picked up, a steady patter against the garage's rusted roof. I turned my attention back to the car. The key in my hand, the one Grandpa had left for the Thunderbird, felt heavy with potential. What was I meant to find? Why had he left it for me, and why now? I decided to explore further. I had to understand everything Grandpa had hidden from me, and what he had seen in me that made him choose me as the one to uncover it. As I stood there, the dim light from my phone's flashlight illuminated the hidden compartments Grandpa had mentioned. They were expertly crafted, concealed in the car's frame. With careful hands, I began searching. Under the seats, I found a hidden compartment. My heart raced as I slowly opened it, revealing a small metal box. It was intricately designed with a pattern that matched the carvings on the garage key. This box, like everything else, felt too significant to be an accident. My hands were clammy as I opened it, revealing a stack of documents, a passport, a driver's license, a keychain with the letter D, and a thick stack of cash, more money than I'd ever dreamed of. The documents seemed official, but the passport wasn't in my name. I froze. The name on the passport was Victoria Patricia Williams. It was me, yet not me. How had Grandpa known I would need this new identity? Why was he setting me up for a life beyond the one I knew? As I sifted through the documents, a piece of metallic cloth caught my eye, folded carefully inside the box. I pulled it out, revealing another key, a small, delicate key with an ornate crown-shaped head. My breath hitched. This key was the one Grandpa had mentioned in the letter. A key to something else. I didn't know what, but I knew that this was the next step. The letter had said that what I found would change my life, and I was beginning to understand just how true that was. I sat back, the weight of the car's hidden contents settling in my mind. The documents, the key, the money. Everything felt surreal. Grandpa had left me a life I had never imagined, and it was all buried in this old, forgotten garage. But what was I supposed to do with it all? As I carefully placed everything back in the box, the letter's words echoed in my mind. This is a responsibility. Grandpa had warned me that whatever I found would change not just my life, but the lives of others. But how could I use this? What was I meant to do with these secrets, these truths buried so deep? The rain continued outside, the sound almost like a comforting lullaby. I stood up, the heavy feeling of the documents, and the key weighing me down. My hands were still trembling as I gathered everything together. As I turned to lock the car back up, I realized that for the first time in my life, I had a choice. A real choice. Not one dictated by Richard or my quiet, passive existence, but one where I could decide my future. What would Grandpa want me to do? Would he want me to keep this secret? To walk away and live the life he'd prepared for me? Or was there something more at play? Something I had yet to understand? I glanced back at the garage, its crumbling walls now holding the weight of a legacy. Grandpa's legacy. The weight of this decision pressed on me, but I knew that whatever I chose, I couldn't go back. There was no going back to the life I had before, one of passivity, of letting others decide my fate. I walked out of the garage, the rain still falling, but something inside me had changed. The world was different now, and so was I. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything Grandpa had left me. The documents, the new identity, the money. Everything pointed to a future I wasn't ready for. But there was no denying it. My old life, the one with Richard, the one I had lived for 15 years, was gone. The betrayal had shattered it. There was no going back, no pretending things could be the same. I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa had known all of this would happen. The way he had prepared me, the way he had left everything in my hands, made me wonder if he had seen my future more clearly than I ever could. Had he known that I would be betrayed by those closest to me? Had he known I would need this secret life he'd created for me? One evening, as I sat in the small apartment I'd rented, trying to sort through my options, the weight of the documents in my bag felt heavier than ever. The car, the key, the money, it was all too much. But there was no denying that this was my new reality. It was time to make a choice. I couldn't keep hiding in the shadows of my old life. Richard and Julia were out there, likely already trying to cover their tracks. They had power, connections, resources. But now, so did I. I had Grandpa's legacy, his wisdom, and his faith in me. I opened my phone, staring at the map of the city. The Park Avenue apartment, the one Grandpa had left me, still felt surreal. The money in my bank account, the new identity. Everything felt like it belonged to someone else. But that someone else was me. I just had to figure out how to use it. I stood up, gathered my things, and made my decision. It was time to leave. Not just the apartment or the city, but the old version of myself, the one who had let others dictate her fate. I had the tools now, the resources, the strength. It was time to use them. The decision to leave wasn't easy. I knew I was walking away from everything I had ever known. The life I had built with Richard. The life that seemed so perfect on the outside. But the truth had been too hard to ignore. I had been living a lie, and now it was time to confront it. I packed my bags quickly, but not without hesitation. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, like a tomb. Everything that had once seemed so comforting now felt suffocating. As I gathered the last of my things, I paused by the window, looking out at the city that had been my home for so long. I didn't know if I would ever return. With a deep breath, I grabbed the envelope with Grandpa's letter, the documents, and the keychain with the crown-shaped key. I knew I wasn't going to let this new life slip away. Whatever happened next, I was going to fight for it. I left the apartment, stepping into the cold night air, a new chapter of my life beginning with each step I took. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in the city, in the life I had known. The truth had come crashing down, and now it was time to rebuild. I made my way to the train station, my heart pounding. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. As the train pulled away from the city, I looked out the window at the skyline shrinking behind me. The city that had been my home for so long now felt foreign, distant. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I knew I couldn't go back. I had to find a way forward, even if I didn't know what that meant yet. I pulled out the documents from Grandpa's box, the ones that contained evidence of the life he had kept hidden from us. The name Victoria Patricia Williams on the passport felt strange to me. It was me, yet not me. This was the person I was supposed to become, the one Grandpa had envisioned for me. As I flipped through the documents, I saw the vast network Grandpa had been part of. It was overwhelming: bank accounts, international schemes, and names of powerful people involved in crimes that spanned continents. And in the middle of it all, Richard and Julia. I had never imagined they could be part of something so far-reaching, so dangerous. But this wasn't just about them. It was bigger than that. It was about exposing the system they were part of, the one that allowed people like them to manipulate, to control, to deceive. I wasn't just uncovering their betrayal, I was exposing a corrupt system that needed to be torn down. I looked at the picture in the folder, one of Richard and Julia together, smiling at some luxury event. The image hit me hard. This was the life they had been leading, one I had never seen. They had built it on lies, on manipulation, and now it was time to tear it down. But how? What could I do with all this information? I couldn't just walk away. I had to fight back. The decision was hard, but I knew I had no choice. I wasn't going to let Richard and Julia's lies destroy me. Grandpa had given me the tools I needed, but it was up to me to use them. I spent the next few days hiding out in a small town, trying to make sense of everything. The new identity Grandpa had given me felt both like a blessing and a burden. I couldn't go back to my old life, and I couldn't let Richard and Julia continue their schemes. But what could I do? How could I take down a system that was so powerful? I knew I needed help. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. Mitchell, the journalist Grandpa had prepared me to meet. He had the resources, the connections, and the courage to expose the truth. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed to plan carefully, to make sure I had all the evidence before I made my move. The next morning, I called Mitchell. He agreed to meet me, but we had to be careful. The people behind these schemes were powerful, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who stood in their way. I gathered all the documents Grandpa had left me, the ones that showed the extent of the corruption, and made my way to the meeting spot. It was time to make my move. It was time to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Meeting Mitchell felt like a moment of clarity in the chaos that had consumed my life. He was everything I had hoped for: professional, calm, and determined to expose the truth. As he reviewed the documents I gave him, his eyes widened with shock. This is huge," he said, his voice low. "If what's in these files is true, you're not just exposing personal betrayal. You're unraveling a massive corruption network." I nodded, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about Richard and Julia anymore. It was about taking down an entire system. Mitchell's eyes were focused now, sharp with the realization of what we were up against. "But you need to understand, this is dangerous. These people don't just disappear, they have the resources to fight back. I understand, I said. But I can't let this continue. Not after everything that's happened. Not after Grandpa left me this legacy. I have to do this. Mitchell agreed to help, but we both knew that once the information was out, there was no going back. Over the next few weeks, Mitchell and I worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence, verifying facts, and piecing together the story. Every document, every photo, every bank statement felt like another step closer to the truth. The system Richard and Julia had built was vast, an intricate web of corruption that stretched across borders, implicating powerful people in every corner of society. We had to be careful. The information we were handling could bring down entire empires. Each new article Mitchell published brought more attention. The public was beginning to take notice, but so were the people who didn't want the truth to get out. We received anonymous threats. Our phones were tapped. Our every move was under surveillance. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I moved from place to place, changing my appearance, keeping a low profile. With my new identity, I felt like a different person, stronger, more in control, yet haunted by the constant fear of being discovered. Richard and Julia were still unaware that I was behind the leaks, but I knew it wouldn't be long before they connected the dots. As the investigation progressed, Mitchell and I decided to go public with the full extent of the financial crimes. The world needed to know. But with each new revelation, the pressure mounted. The system was fighting back, and we knew it was only a matter of time before they came for us. The day the final article was published, the world erupted. News outlets from around the globe were covering the story, discussing the corruption, the hidden accounts, the international web of lies. The investigation had snowballed into something bigger than either Mitchell or I had anticipated. But as the story hit the front pages, something shifted. The authorities, who had ignored the issue for so long, were suddenly forced to act. Arrests were made, high-ranking officials, business leaders, and politicians were implicated. Richard and Julia's names were now front and center, their involvement undeniable. As the world reacted, I found myself trapped between a sense of relief and fear. The truth was out there, but so was my identity. I was no longer Victoria Williams in the safety of anonymity. I was a target. The system I had helped expose wasn't going to let me walk away unscathed. Mitchell and I spoke less frequently. The risks were too high now, but I knew he was continuing the fight. The information was too explosive, too dangerous to bury, and he was determined to see it through to the end. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, a sense of unease settled over me. The city outside was loud, chaotic, but my mind was somewhere else, on what was coming next. I had done what Grandpa had prepared me to do. I had exposed the truth, shattered the illusions that had been built around Richard and Julia, and uncovered the corruption that had been festering for years. But as the days went on, I realized that the hardest part was yet to come. The people behind the scenes, the ones who had controlled everything for so long, wouldn't go down without a fight. I was no longer just a passive observer in this fight for justice. I had become an active participant. And now, I had to figure out how to stay ahead of them. The phone rang, and for a moment, I hesitated. Mitchell had been distant lately, focusing on the fallout from the articles. I had done my part, but I was beginning to fear that I had drawn too much attention. What if the system wasn't just targeting Richard and Julia? What if I had become the next target? The call was from Mitchell. His voice was tense, filled with urgency. "Victoria," he said, "they know it's you. They've connected the dots. We don't have much time." My heart skipped a beat. I had known this day would come, but I wasn't prepared for it. I thought I had covered my tracks well enough. But the truth was, I had underestimated how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. "They've got people watching you," Mitchell continued. "They know where you are. It's only a matter of time before they come for you." My hands shook as I gripped the phone. I had to leave. "Now, I'll pack and leave immediately," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising inside me. Where can I go? What should I do? There's a safe house. It's not far from here, Mitchell replied. I'll send you the details. You need to disappear for a while, lay low until things settle down. I didn't argue. Mitchell was right. I couldn't stay in one place for long. I had to keep moving, keep changing my identity. I had started this fight, but now I had to protect myself from the very people I had exposed. I packed my things quickly, stuffing what I could into a small bag. The apartment felt colder now, the walls closing in around me. I glanced at the photo of Grandpa on the table. His calm, steady gaze seemed to offer me strength even now. I wasn't going to let them silence me. I had already given everything I had to expose the truth, and now I was going to fight for my own survival. The cab ride to the safe house felt like it took hours, though it was only a few minutes away. My mind raced with thoughts of the consequences of everything I had done. I had exposed the people who thought they were untouchable, the people who had controlled everything for so long. But now, as I arrived at the safe house, I realized that the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The safe house was nothing more than a small, nondescript apartment on the edge of town. It felt like a temporary refuge, a place where I could hide until the storm passed. But the truth was, I wasn't safe anywhere. Not while they were looking for me. I tried to sleep, but rest was impossible. Every creak in the floor, every passing car outside made me jump. I had been so focused on exposing the corruption, on bringing Richard and Julia down, that I hadn't considered the personal consequences. My life had been turned upside down, and now it seemed like there was no escaping the fallout. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. But for now, I had to lie low, keep my head down, and wait for the right moment to strike again. Days turned into weeks, and the media coverage of the corruption scandal continued to spread. Arrests were made, investigations were launched, and the system Richard and Julia had been part of began to crumble. But as the world reacted, I realized that my role in this story was far from over. Mitchell kept in touch, but our conversations were brief and cryptic. The investigation was still ongoing, and he was working tirelessly to bring the full truth to light. But with every new article published, the danger to me grew. Richard and Julia's network was vast, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. I couldn't stay in hiding forever. I had to make a choice, keep running or stand up and face the consequences. It wasn't just about exposing the corruption anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, about taking control of my own fate. The question was, how much was I willing to risk? One evening, as I sat in the safe house, I received a message from Mitchell. It was short and to the point. They're closing in. We need to act fast. The words sent a shiver down my spine. It was time to make my move, but the stakes had never been higher. I had to decide whether I was willing to face the consequences of everything I had uncovered. I didn't have much time. The people I had exposed were dangerous, and they weren't going to stop until they found me. But I had something they didn't: truth. I had the documents, the evidence, and the will to keep fighting. With determination, I stood up, ready to take the next step. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. The plan was simple: get the documents to the authorities, expose the full extent of the corruption, and make sure Richard and Julia paid for their role in it. But even as I prepared to take action, I knew it wouldn't be easy. The people behind the scenes were powerful, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. I contacted Mitchell, telling him to prepare for the final step. It was time to bring the full truth to light, no matter the cost. I wasn't going to let fear stop me anymore. I had already sacrificed everything: my marriage, my family, my old life. Now I was ready to fight for the future I deserved. As I left the safe house, I felt a surge of strength. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to back down now. The final meeting was set, and I was ready. The documents were secure, the evidence was irrefutable, and I had no more fear. The truth was on my side, and with that knowledge, I felt invincible. I met Mitchell one last time, handed him the final pieces of the puzzle, and together, we took the fight to the next level. This was more than just a personal vendetta. It was about justice. It was about exposing the system that had been built on lies and manipulation and making sure it never operated again. We were ready to take down the powerful people who thought they were untouchable. The day we released the final article was a game changer. The world finally saw the full scope of the corruption, the money laundering, the international schemes that had gone unnoticed for so long. And it was all because of the documents I had uncovered. But as the world reacted, I knew that the battle wasn't over. Richard and Julia's network was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they found me. The stakes had never been higher, but I was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the life I had lived, free from the lies that had bound me. The fallout from the article was immediate. There were arrests, investigations, and public outrage. The system I had helped expose was crumbling, piece by piece. Richard and Julia's names were being dragged through the mud, their lies exposed for the world to see. But as the investigation gained momentum, I knew it wouldn't be long before they came for me. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed the truth. But now the consequences were coming, and I had to be ready. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had nothing left to lose. As the investigation continued, Mitchell and I stayed in touch, but the tension was palpable. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous things became. Richard and Julia were no longer the only ones I had to worry about. The system was vast, and I had just scratched the surface. But I knew this was the only way. The truth needed to come out, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. I had already lost so much, but I had also gained something priceless. My own strength, my own voice. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. I kept moving, staying one step ahead of those who would stop at nothing to silence me. The world was changing, and I had played a role in it. But I couldn't forget that there were still people out there who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. I thought about Grandpa, about the legacy he had left me, and the woman he believed I could become. I wasn't just the quiet librarian anymore. I was someone who had the courage to stand up, to expose the truth, and to make the world a better place. But there was still more to do. The battle for justice wasn't over. The final confrontation was inevitable. I had exposed the truth, taken down the system, and brought Richard and Julia to justice. But the fight wasn't over until the last piece of the puzzle had been revealed. I stood firm, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. But I had come so far. I had uncovered the truth, and now I had the power to shape my own future. The journey wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my strength. The fight for truth was far from over, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready, and I wasn't going to back down. The world needs people who are willing to stand up for the truth, no matter the cost. Will you be one of them?